Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the PTSM Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Lewis Holland. Lewis, mate, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be on. Look forward to having a yarn.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. As I said, we're talking a little bit off the camera. I'm not someone that grew up with rugby for the most part in my life, which I think is going to bode well for the chat because the purpose of this chat really is just to sort of for me to understand you as a bloke, and I guess for the audience to understand you as a bloke and sort of what makes you tick outside of you as the athlete. Mate, give me a bit of a snapshot. What's your current situation like, given where we are in this mad time?
Yeah, well, as most people, I think they've had to adapt and change plans or lifestyles. So me personally, we would have been somewhat, I think maybe 4 or 5 weeks out from competing at the Olympics in Tokyo if all was in a normal world. But I'm currently in Melbourne down here with the Rebels, just training with them because Sevens at the moment, because it's such an international kind of tour that we play and operate on, that's non-existent at the moment. So, I've got an opportunity to come down here and try my hand back at the 15s, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. What's Melbourne like? It's only been a short amount of time, obviously, but what's Melbourne like so far compared to where you've grown up? And maybe let's touch a little bit on that, where you grew up.
Yeah, look, it's completely different to where I grew up. I've been living in Sydney for the last 7 years, so I wouldn't say that there's too much really different in regards to city life, but I grew up in a little town called Braidwood, which is between Canberra and the coast, and there's only about 1,000 odd people there, so I guess it is a bit of a change, but I've been living in the city for a good number of years, so it's not a massive shock, but something different, something you're not used to, and finding your way around when those trams are driving around can somewhat get a bit sketchy.
Yeah. I often speak to people who are obviously grown up in sort of the countryside or amongst the nature, so to speak, and oftentimes I hear them talk about the noise of the city. Do you notice that a lot? You're probably used to it, obviously, because you've lived in Sydney. But when you first moved into sort of the concrete jungle, did you notice a lot more sound?
Yeah, you notice a lot. I guess your two big ones are sound and light.
Yeah.
When you look up in Sydney or here, you can see the bright stars, but when you grow up in the country, you see all stars. And the noise as well. If you're working in a paddock, which I have been for the last kind of 3 months with COVID, you can hear the odd aeroplane fly over, where you probably can hear it if it leaves the airport here, but you definitely don't hear it flying through the through the night sky or the afternoon sky.
100%. Yeah. Well, let's go sort of back before we go forward. You are where you are now, but what sort of set the template for you as an athlete and I guess as a professional now? Where did it all really begin?
Good question. I kind of grew up just as a normal, regular country kid. When you grow up in those small towns, you tend to just focus on what's in the town. You don't really look outside. I wouldn't say that I grew up aspiring to be a professional athlete or, have those dreams of one day being able to represent my country. I did a bit of athletics and cross country and soccer, and I was pretty quick as a kid. So, I did play some sport and do a little bit of competitive stuff, but it was kind of it wasn't really something that I aspired to be. I wanted to be a jackaroo and go up north.
Love that.
And that's just to really follow my uncle's footsteps because they kind of did that. So I thought that might be pretty cool and I would enjoy that lifestyle. So it kind of changed when we started going to school in Canberra, which is about 100k or so from home.
Mm-hmm.
So we travelled in and out every day since I think I started going there in year 6. And then, St Edmunds in Canberra is just a really it's a big rugby school. It's an all-boys school. Started playing rugby there and started to enjoy it. Made some good friends. Started playing in rep sides, and I just kind of just enjoyed it. I got to see obviously a lot more from where I grew up in regards to going to Canberra, which is a big city for, I guess, where we grew up. But then being able to go and play in Sydney and go around the world a little bit with schoolboys, and then have the opportunity to play sevens and travel the world. It kind of just, it all really happened overnight. And, I look back now and it's nearly been, it's coming up to being 10 years. So it only feels like yesterday that I kind of was told that I was going overseas, and I still remember feeling homesick.
Yeah. Well, that I find it fascinating. And of all the interviews I've heard you do, and the little bits and pieces that I've read up about you before I spoke to you, you always, the one thing that strikes me with you is you always keep that sense of who you are from the beginning. And especially when you talk about leadership, and we'll get into that a little later. But one thing you touched on there was sort of every time you sort of stepped out into a new layer, whether it be school, whether it be going international, you sort of added something extra to yourself. What was one of the biggest shocks to your system, whether it be where you were living or, I mean, overseas, you get culture shock wherever you are, but was there any particular moment where you really opened yourself up to a new world and it just had an effect on you?
I guess probably when I actually, so the way sevens came about was I was at the Brumbies, and then there was a sevens tournament in Darwin, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to go up there?" And we went up there, I think, for like half a week. We ended up playing against the Australian side because it used to be, it wasn't full time. They used to just send teams away and you'd come together for a few weeks before a couple of tournaments. Anyway, we ended up playing against them in Darwin. It was kind of their pre-warm-up before they went to New Zealand and Las Vegas at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, "Oh, do you want to start up and train for the week?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, why not? Like, that'd be fun." And then kind of from that week, it led on to, all right, well, here's a contract. You want to sign a contract, and we'll send you home on I think it was the Friday, pack a bag, and we'll see you in Sydney on Saturday. And I was like, geez, does that happen fast? And then from there, just I reckon that little sense of being homesick and kind of like, just what had happened. I was like, I wasn't really ready for it. It wasn't something that planned and just fell upon my plate. So
yep.
I think that moment there, I was kind of like, well, you're here now, so make sure you do everything to stay here, because it wasn't something that you thought was going to happen right here and then, but you've got the opportunity. Back yourself, enjoy it, and go for it.
100%. Like you sort of, it's interesting. You go from, it seems like you were doing things at an early age, and pretty much as for the most of us, we all do. We don't really know what we want to do when we grow up. We sort of get told to sort of try and pick, but early on, it's really, we just gravitate towards what we like to do. And I can only assume footy was fun for you. You had that leg speed, as we all know early on. Not that you don't have it now, but I think early on everyone's a tad more quicker.
Look, they've slowed down a little bit, but
well, surgery will do that to you. But I guess once you get that contract put in front of you, all of a sudden the hobby becomes the business. What's the adjustment in moving into something that was once a hobby and maybe something you like to do for fun, and then all of a sudden, oh, hang on, this is we're talking about contracts and legalities, and what's that change like?
I think because back then it was still a little bit. It wasn't a full-time program, so I guess the way I transitioned to it was probably different to what other people do. So it was kind of, I could still live at home. I trained at the Brumbies, played sevens, played 15s, and worked all at the same time. So it wasn't until 2013 that we became full-time athletes, and I actually had to move to Brisbane for a year, and then we moved again to Sydney. But I guess my little transition period there, being able to work and have an understanding, I guess, from coming out of school, working, having to train after work or before work, it probably set me up in regards to, just being able to understand how lucky you are to be able to do that in your life. And, working as well also allowed me to have the mindset of not being afraid of, doing hard things, I guess, and understanding the period, or like the bit of a pyramid where you do have a boss, and then you have, your tradesmen and your labourers or your apprentices, and just that little pyramid, I guess, that I think nowadays is a little bit lost because everyone can do anything, which was back then. But I still think that just set me up to understand that there still is like a little bit of a stepping stone and how things work in an overall sense, whether you're playing football or whatever. It just set me up to be, to be able to be really adaptable.
Yep, for sure. Talk to me a little bit about your travelling, because obviously it's one of the perks of the job, so to speak. You get to travel around the world, obviously, and play the game that you love to play. But more importantly, I think it's always a chance to understand different cultures, and we're all so similar, yet we live differently. What are some of the places you've been to that really stick with you today that you might want to explore a little bit more?
Yeah, we definitely do travel to all corners. I think the way my partner and I, Charlotte, we went to Laos and Vietnam to do a thing called Pass It Back, and it's just like a charity that they use rugby for like learning skills, leadership skills, and just to kind of change the way that life is necessarily run in those small little communities out there. So just seeing how much excitement it brought them, and then also how, the leaders in their little communities who might only be 15 or 16 teaching these younger kids how to play, tag rugby, but then also within that as well, they teach them, general hygiene and just different life skills that they can take on. Like, I think that was probably the most eye-opening, just to see how, those small communities are so remote and, so isolated, but still they've got the ability to be leaders in their community and change, I guess, the way that they've grown up and see life. So I think that was kind of an eye-opener. And I wouldn't mind exploring more about, that avenue and seeing how the knock-on effects that has in smaller communities. But visiting various different countries, whether you're in South Africa, Dubai, London, they're all very unique in their own sense. I think the biggest one you get out of it, you just realise how lucky you are to live in Australia. There's a lot of things here where normal for us, which isn't normal for everyone else. Like, you can go down the street and you can basically eat whatever cuisine you want. You're free to go to the park, and so for in Hong Kong, for example, you can't even really walk on the grass or nothing like that. So I think the little things you take for granted here, when you get overseas and you're not allowed to do, you're like, oh, that's a bit weird. So I think more just like the understanding of how lucky you are back home.
Yeah.
The things that we have here that seem, that aren't really things that stand out, that will stand out when you do go to those other countries.
Man, I find I don't know if maybe it's a Melbourne thing or just an Australia thing in general. I find everything here to be so clean. Like, streets are paved perfectly. Like, I noticed when I got back, I spent about 3 years away. I was in Israel for a couple of years and China for a little bit as well. And just the little things, like you said, you can just go for a kick in the local park, and I think things just look cleaner. Air is cleaner. You just pick up on those little things, and you're right. It's such a luxury, and I guess, and I'm sure through your experience, you've had it as well, where you go to places and you tell people, I'm from Australia, and I'm sure you get the same reaction. Everyone has this, oh wow, like it's like we're an exotic place to a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. You do get those expressions a lot, and I guess the way that you do see it in the media or on social media or whatever, that it is very beautiful. There's animals, and it does look very free flowing, but yeah, I guess until you experience different countries and you kind of realize what you have, you don't really realize that.
100%. Yeah. No, totally with you. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. Obviously, you've been in, I guess, the highest of high positions of leadership, and I've heard you talk about, the title of being captain or the title of being a leader, and how that doesn't necessarily phase you, because I guess, what got you to become a leader is your actions. And I want to talk a little bit about you and your style of leadership. You've obviously, you're a bit more experienced now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we call you a veteran yet, but what's your style of leadership, and how has it evolved, if at all?
It's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily put my leadership in a certain category.
Yep.
But like my take on leadership is it's who you are. They say you can become a leader and you can work on different skills and everything else. And I 100% agree on that. But I think that the best leaders are true to who they are. And look, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, because everyone's different and you don't always want necessarily the same leader. Yes, you can be better at your communication skills or better at doing certain things, but I feel that when you get put under pressure and, you're either under a timeline or you don't really know the answer, you're going to come back to who you are. Like, that's going to be your default. You will be able to adjust that a little bit, but you're going to come back to that. And I've always had the thought, just, I guess the way I grew up as well, just kind of you work hard and lead by example. And yeah, sometimes I can get a bit angry and vocal and whatever. And I've tried to work on that, but yeah, I just believe just be true to yourself, because when shit hits the fan, as I like to say, you're gonna fall one way, and it's usually not the way you're not. It's going to be the way who you are. So just be authentic and be honest. And look, ask for guidance with someone who is a different leader to you, but just remember that you are you, and the way you present yourself, if you're genuine and authentic, then people will actually follow you for that reason as well, rather than you being two different people and people being confused, and then it becomes, well, he's different there to there, and they just don't understand who you are. So I guess it's a bit of a different take on leadership, but those are the things that I kind of follow and try and be.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah. So whether it was growing up or early in your career, whatever the case may be, who were some of the pillars for you? Not necessarily athletes, just people in general who, I guess, sort of guided you, whether it be in one way or another, whether it was maybe family members, or what was the early sort of, because you've molded yourself into sort of who you are, and you've really realized who you are, and you're really comfortable in that, which is fantastic. But along the way, you pick up little bits and pieces from everyone. What were those elements for you?
Yeah, you do. And I think the biggest ones are your own mistakes. And for you to be able to, I believe everything happens for a reason, and it's right or wrong. Sometimes you make the right decisions and sometimes you make the wrong decisions, but you're never going to learn as much off a right decision as a wrong one. And look, I'm not going to say that everything I've done that's a negative that I feel is a positive, but I'm going to take that experience and digest that and break it down and reevaluate, could I have done something better, or could I have done something that could have ended in a different result. But I think that, those learnings, and if you can sit there and break them down and talk yourself, all right, well, if I had that again, I could go this way, and not be narrow-minded. I think they're your biggest learning curves. Mm-hmm. And like I said, you're gonna take bits and pieces from either, if it's a leadership coach or another leader, that you're like, oh, I actually like the way he does this, or I like the way he does that, or I can actually add that. So I think it's just about knowing who you are first, and then you can go out and start looking for little cues and little things that can help you get better. But I think the biggest one is just having that conversation with yourself, when there are dark times, how you got through them, what you could have done better. And then in the positive times as well, like it's always easy to sit there and criticise about negative. But if you actually do something positive, like think back and, reward yourself and understand why that happened or how you got there, because, that's going to be another positive step as well for you to be able to grow and, hopefully achieve more.
Yeah, for sure. What's some of your real proud moments in life, whether it be in your career? I mean, I can only assume, putting on the green and gold was, I can't even imagine what that's like. And then obviously, being a captain as well. But what are some of the more prouder moments or achievements in your life that might not necessarily be from sport?
Well, I think Charlotte and I bought a farm 3 years ago.
Yep. In Queensland?
Yeah, in Queensland. Yeah. I guess having that dream of one day being a jackaroo and then having our own little place to be able to, have our own cows and get away from, I think that's a big achievement for both of us. Mm-hmm. And then we got through we brought the place, and then we went through 2 years of drought, and there were stressful times for us, for Charlotte's family as well, and you go out there and there's just dirt and dust, and then that's another point where you have to learn and find positives or find ways to make things better in that situation, because your idea of it, it's perfect. There's going to be cows eating grass, and all of a sudden there's no damn water. They're eating dirt. You got to buy feed. It's not what you signed up for. But to kind of get through to the other side and be able to go, well, we managed to play football. We also managed to, run a farm in the drought and that kind of thing. They're big learning curves, and I'm all about learning in life. So I think that's that's probably a proud moment to get through that. And I guess you don't draw upon those times when they are tough, but now you look back and go, well, look, that's actually a pretty big achievement for us to still train and perform well, but then also have that go on. And then you lead that into the current climate that we're living in at the moment, that the economy shuts down and everyone starts freaking out because they can't survive for a week, where, not just myself, but people on the land went through a 5 or 6 year drought and they've been told, just put enough hay away for bad times. And hang on a second, they're paying for cattle feed, they're paying their mortgage, they're paying to stay alive, they're not getting many government handouts, and they're still making away. So, like, they're a resilient bunch, and they learn. So I guess being a part of that and understanding was also just kind of, you take a bit of credit out of that, to be able to come out of the other side and still have your cows, and your place is looking good now because it's got a bit more grass and the dams are full again. And so I guess off field in recent years, that would be a big highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. I relate to what you said. I mean, we're living through it right now, really, with this, lockout, quarantine, shutdown, whatever you want to call it. It's affecting people in different ways, in different socioeconomic regions, or whatever the case may be. But like you said, that resilience in just knowing everything will pass at some point. It sort of happens for the good and for the bad. When things are going great, you can bet your bottom dollar things aren't always going to stay great. And when things are going shit house, as they are for a lot of people at the moment, they're doing it tough. The beauty in that is that it's not going to last forever. There was obviously that famous notion of equilibrium, and never let yourself get too high, never let yourself get too low. Does that make it easy for you? For example, you had your Achilles injury a couple of years back. So did that make it easier for you when you were going through your recovery, just to sort of get through those days where things were probably a little bit shit house? You didn't know if you're going to become the same player that you were, or whatever the case may be. But did you have that train of thought of, hang on, there's a lot worse that could happen?
Yeah, I always, my saying that you could always be a bricklayer.
Yeah.
Winter time, and I've done a little bit of it, wintertime mixing mud, or just something worse than where you are. And you do have, don't get me wrong, you're going to have dark times. Like, I remember getting out of my cast and you're trying to do a double leg calf raise and your foot just doesn't even move.
Yeah, right.
And you're kind of like, it's going to be a long run here. But then, I just always just remind myself that there's someone always worse off than you.
Yeah.
And someone's been there and someone's done it and someone's got back. So there's no reason why you can't do it. So I think, with that, I just took it literally like one day at a time early on because the process was that slow. But then I guess once you start actually moving again and running, your mindset's kind of like, are you up for this? And when you are doing a rehab run or, rehab, you're not a part of the team. You're on your own a little bit and you're running with your own thoughts, where when you're playing, you kind of just, you're doing things and you're not thinking. So, there was times where you'd be running going, oh, geez, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that or this or that. And then once you get to a certain level, then all of a sudden you're back doing a few skills. You do something and you look back and you go, huh. And then, I did that, or I
definitely couldn't do that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. And you just kind of beat your own mind at its own game there with, ball in hand and getting around your teammates and, just going back and having a look what you did and, giving yourself confidence in that.
Yeah. When did you have a point in your life, in your career, where you sort of, I guess when you're early on, when you're coming through the ranks, you're probably doing as much as what you're told to do. And then a lot of people talk to me about there sort of comes a certain point where you know your own body a lot better than what you used to, your loads and whatnot. When did that happen for you? When did you sort of become a little bit more of your own athlete? Obviously, you take the advice of the professionals, but when did you become your own sort of person?
Yeah, I'd say that 2016 after my Achilles, because it took a little while to warm up. I didn't necessarily have aches, but other things were kind of creeping in. So I think there you get past the thing of like just looking, I can rock up and get on with it to, all right, I have to do some prehab here and then also some recovery. So I think, that was my first I had a few hamstring tears, but I had never had like a surgery and had to start from the bottom and come back up. So I definitely think that point in time was where you understand your body and what you need to do. And if it's not where it needs to be at training, like you got to a point where you could go and have those conversations and say, look, today I'm a bit tight here or whatever. And you're not trying to get out of things, but you just know that it's probably a warning sign rather than I'm just going to get through it.
It's funny when you put that person next to maybe your 16-year-old self, and if you show a clip of your older self saying that, what the difference in mindset is. Yeah,
and it's a funny conversation. And we spoke about this as a team. That when we were playing, we spoke about, are you ready to play? Are you prepared to play? And that was our whole thing. And then 6 months after we kept saying it, like, are you prepared to play? Are you ready to play? And I was like, well, and because I was a young kid that came through, I was like, well, who's actually teaching these kids if they're ready to play? Because for me personally, it wasn't until I was, 23, 24 that I actually understood what I needed to do to be prepared and ready to play. So it was actually an interesting conversation that we had, and the stuff we try to do, we, open it up and said, oh, what do you need to do? Like, there's obviously part of the team that know how to prepare, and then there's those younger guys that come in and just, have a red frog and a sip of Powerade and they're running on all engines. But it is quite interesting that when you do sit back and, like I said, when I reflected and was like, well, hang on a second, who actually taught me if I was ready? And I was like, it was myself. Like, sat me down and said, look, you're going to become a point in time where you're going to have to do this prehabby stuff. And it's usually off the back of injuries or, things where you learn, or I need to do this to warm that part up or that. So, I guess hopefully the evolution of sport that, those younger guys come in that, they're sat down and they've had conversations with older guys and, what works for you on game day might not necessarily work for that bloke over there, but we're not trying to get everyone on the same page. We're just trying to get everyone where they need to be.
Yeah, sure. Everyone's got to be their own leader of themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're not leading yourself, well, then you're not going to do the job for the team. Or if you're not following or wanting to do what I guess if you put a blanket over it to prepare for a game, well, then you're not going to have the right mindset before you even get going. So, it is a good point. I don't think many athletes probably find out or get told. They necessarily learn it from themselves.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because you've got to give them that chance to learn. And as you said, the best way to learn for a lot of people is through making those fuck ups. You've got to make those mistakes. And it's almost like, how much do you let them go and make those mistakes, and how much do you sit them down and give them that stern word? It's sort of like the chicken and the egg. What comes first? You just sort of got to play it based on the situation.
Yeah, and guidance as well. Like, just you don't have to tell them what to do, but just look, try this. And it got to a point where when we were warming up, we'd kind of, all right, for the first 2 minutes you're doing this, and it was very regimented. And then it was like, well, what if like people aren't enjoying the warm up? Like, you see some teams that just, they walk together real tight and they're really like, regimented and sweet. If there's 15 people in that team that like that, no worries. Like, go ahead. And but if your team isn't like that and you're trying to be that, well, then you're just asking people to be who they not want to be, and that takes it back to the leadership quality. You're asking someone to do something they're not comfortable with doing when they're about to play a game during the warm up. So you're actually self-doubting them before you even get onto the field. So our warm up was very regimented, where now it's kind of playing sevens. It was all right. You're out there for the first 5 minutes, do what you want. If you don't know what you need to do, go and see an S&C or go see one of the other boys, or and then we come in and we did a lot more different things where if you didn't want to do something, you didn't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But there'll be a passing station, a tackle station, a kick in, a restart, and you could just float in and out of those little sections. And I actually really enjoyed it because I had never done that on my own. In all the years that I've played, and we did it in the last, from basically like the last 4 or 5 tournaments, I think, or 4 tournaments, and the last 2 tournaments we come second and third. So I'm not saying that's put it down to it, but it's also saying, look, we're not going to baby you, like, go do it, and then we're going to give you some responsibility and yourself getting ready, because like, it shouldn't be the coach's job that he has to add energy to you to fire you up to play and represent your country. Like, he shouldn't feel at the end of the day that he's drained because he's out there trying to psych you up. Like, you're playing for your country. Like, you've got to find your own way there. Yeah.
Well, it's a good segue, because I want to touch on you and what motivates you. Like, you get out of bed, what sparks you? What's your flame?
I think myself is a flame as well. Like, I think when you start, you kind of play for your family, and you like play for your mum and dad and all that. But then I think as you get a bit older, you play for yourself, and you kind of see where you can actually get and what you can achieve. And then I guess going back, like, I play for like Braidwood, or those little towns that I often drive through, and just if I can be successful and tell my story, that there'd be hidden gems everywhere out there, and it's just, regardless if it's on the sporting field or not, that it's just, if someone follows or hears your story and their mindset's on something, and it just gives them another little direction that they might want to have a look at, that they're not the only person that's done it. I think there's plenty of people out there that get set on doing something, and then they do it and they don't enjoy it, and then they fall back and don't really know what to do, or they're scared to go and give something a crack. So I think that little hindrance there, that kind of I probably had, where I just wanted to do one thing and that was it, and then being able to do one thing led to another, and then if you asked me as a 16-year-old what would I achieve, it probably wouldn't have been much other than riding a horse, or something like that. Like, it wasn't. So I guess that kind of sparks me up to just be able to, trying to achieve as much as I can, enjoy it. But then hopefully one day someone can go, well, if he can do it, I can do it, or there's 2 or 3 people that are doing it. Why can't I do it? And it doesn't have, like I said, doesn't have to be on a sporting field. It can be work related or even just getting out and seeing something different.
Yeah, no, I totally relate. Where I grew up and where I went to school, it was one of those schools there was just that mindset of, we don't go to uni. We're from here. We're from Layla. We don't do these things. And I feel the exact same every time I drive past the old school. I get that sense of, I don't know, it's a bit of pride. A lot of kids look back on school and they might not like their teachers or whatnot. I copped some harsh lessons early on, and I look at that now. I'm like, they absolutely had my best interest at heart. They steered me on the right path, and I feel the exact same. We had Anthony Koutafidis, he's a big Carlton legend. Obviously, he's the sole athlete to come out of my school, and it's the same thing. He was 20 years ago or more, but that legacy lives on. And I remember when I was going through high school, it was the same. It was like, oh well, Kuta went on to do this, and he was from Laylaw, and so I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and I think it's important. I think also what you touched on before about the community work you were doing in Laos, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sort of thing too is I mean, it's just good for the soul. It gives other people, who are maybe watching you from the outside, it gives them that, oh, okay, well, if he can do that, I can make that change too. But I think for yourself, it's good for the soul to be able to give back and use your platform.
Yeah, definitely. I think, in a way, you probably get more out of it. You get the enjoyment to seeing, like those kids over there. Like we trained them, and it was like a car park. This thing was water rutted out, and there was rocks, and they're running around barefoot, and whatever you did a push up, and they started laughing because they just didn't know what it was and hadn't seen it before, and those were things that just kind of like you do really step back and just go, well, look how much excitement they're having, and first class facilities are not there, and they're probably treading on rocks and bloody cutting their feet, but they're just enjoying that, and you kind of like, it's very surreal, and you like your soul gets fueled, and it's more like you come out of there feeling a lot better than you probably think you would have.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, mate. I've really enjoyed the chat. I've got one more question for you before I let you go. What are your non-negotiables, things that you do on a daily basis that have to get done, whether it's you or the people around you?
Oh, what are my non-negotiables? I wouldn't say I have a list of them.
Yeah. Behaviors or attitudes or ways you think about things that have to be done with every situation you come up with.
I think one that I've kind of always done, and it wasn't until recently that I had a conversation with someone about it. But it's just when you like whatever you do or whatever, if you're having a bad day, like don't take that with you. So, and I'll use an example of that. Like if you're having a bad day and I'm meeting you, well, if I had a shit morning and then I come on here and give you a shit interview, or I have negative attitude and stuff, like why should you cop that?
Yeah.
Like, from something else. And I think that sometimes you are told like express your feelings and stuff, but look, if someone else has annoyed me, or I'm not having the best day, I didn't have the best sleep, like don't bring that negative energy into training, because like everyone else who's in there who's happy don't need your problems in there.
Yeah.
Like there is a point in time or a place where you can seek help, but don't take them and then deliver them to someone else and make them feel like you give them what they give you. So I just think, even if, say for example, you're hungover, like don't drag your ass. Like if you go out and have a good time, put your work boots on and go to work. Like don't. And that's what I've always said. But recently I just had a conversation with someone about if he had a shit client that really annoyed him and he was meeting another client, like he can't take that. You can't take that negativity with you and present that. Like it's not. It's not fair for you to take that negative energy and present it there, because it's not their problems. So I think that's my non-negotiable. Just whatever's happening or whatever you've done, you've got to get up and go to work, whether you're hungover or angry or you haven't slept. Like you will feel better at the end of the day for doing it.
You got to show up.
Yeah, you got to show up.
Yeah, I feel you, mate. It has been a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. It's been good to understand you, and for, welcome to Melbourne again, and we'll see you around, mate.
No, thanks for that. I enjoyed the chat. It's been good.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thank you.